moving into our next story of the day here to keep things going. You all remember how there was this big hubbub, I think it was a year ago, or maybe a little over a year ago, where there was these photos taken of these Border Patrol agents on horses, and the left lost their mind in the Democrat Party and said that they were whipping these migrants. And it turns out that they weren't whips. They were just the reins of the horses, which came out, I don't know, like an hour later, where people that rode horses, people that are familiar with horses, people that have seen the stuff go, yeah, those are just reins. They're not actually whipping anybody. So you had President Joe Biden, condone it. You had Jen Psaki doing the same thing, Karine Jean-Pierre, all the White House admins and people that follow Joe Biden, the Democrat Party, all sat there and condoned these Border Patrol agents, investigations galore. All this stuff happened. Then it came out that there wasn't going to be any punishment to these Border Patrol agents because they didn't do the very said thing that the mainstream media, the White House, and all the Democratic people were saying they did, of which they're, again, claiming that they whipped these illegal immigrants. Well, check this one out, folks. And by the way, nobody's apologized for this. Fox News reported and published an email on Wednesday that said was delivered to Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, alerting him prior to a major press conference that Border Patrol agents had never whipped migrants. Do you think that he came out on the airwaves and said that, or do you think he went with the narrative? Do you think he lied and went with the narrative that they did whip these migrants? Which one do you think? We all know, because history told us, he went with the latter. The email, which also was shared on Twitter, showed that Mayorkas had been provided with a statement from photographers who took the photos others used to claim that the Border Patrol agents had been whipping migrants prior to the press conference, at which he referred to the imagery as horrifying. So he's notified. The dude still goes out there and says it's horrifying. The dude still goes out there and pushes this narrative, which just goes to show you can't trust anything from these politicians and also the Biden administration. Here it is. This is what was posted by Fox LA. Quote, new email reveals DHS Secretary Mayorkas was alerted by DHS top public affairs official that the whipping narrative behind the horseback Border Patrol photos wasn't true. But at the White House press conference 2.5 hours later, he didn't refute the narrative, instead calling the images horrifying. Just lovely, right? Just lovely. But this is the guy that went on Brett Byers' show, Fox News, like, oh, well, we got the drug cartels. Yeah, we got everything under control. And the conversation was kind of centered, not just around the drug cartels, but it was centered around terrorists that came through the border and were apprehended. And everybody's like, well, what'd you do with them? Where are they? And he wouldn't give a clear answer. And he was also followed up by Jim Jordan during a Senate Judiciary Committee, I believe, or the House Judiciary Committee. And he couldn't answer the question either. No clue where these guys were at. Didn't have any information on them, which just makes us wonder, the BS stuff that he's saying here, the narrative he's pushing here. And then I'm supposed to believe him when he talks about that we know where the terrorists are. We know where they're going. There's no sleeper cells in America. It's just this. It's open borders, folks. And I know you all know this. It's open borders. You got MS-13 gang members coming through. You got drug cartel coming through, massive amounts of fentanyl coming through, violent gang members, smuggling, sex trafficking, terrorists coming through. I mean, you got a litany of people. You got over 800,000 gotaways. It's up to 1 million now since Joe Biden's got in office alone that have come through the border. You're telling me you don't even think one person of those was a terrorist? You don't think out of the 1 million people that came through, you don't think there was one violent person that came through there that has a potential of creating mass problems here in America? It's amazing. But they don't see it. Democrats don't see it. The email quoted as saying that he had never seen Border Patrol agents whip anyone. This comes from I believe the photographer that sent this. Quote, some of the Haitian men started running, trying to go around the horses. I've never seen them whip anyone. He was swinging it, but it can be misconstrued when you're looking at the picture. You had the Fox News reporter went on the note that the email, which went to Mayorkas and several other DHS Public Affairs Assistant Secretary Marcia Espinoza, was sent before the press conference, but Mayorkas adopted the same tone that had already been taken by President Joe Biden. Of course he would. Why wouldn't he? They're trying to push a narrative because if you recall, this was kind of early on in Joe Biden's presidency, if I remember correctly, And they want open borders, right? It was just a challenge. It wasn't a crisis. No problems here. And if they can make the Border Patrol agents seem like the bad guys, then they have somebody to pin the blame on everything that's going on. It's horrific. It's terrible. Look what they're doing to these people. They're mistreating them and all these things. And now what are they pinning the blame on? Putin on other things. Oh, it's Trump's fault. It's always everybody else's fault with this administration. They play the blame game, and that's what they're going to do. That is literally what they are going to do for the rest of his presidency. We're 2 years in, you guys, and they're still saying that it's Trump's fault. They're still saying it's Putin's fault here. They're still saying the economy, of which we're in a recession, and literally Joe Biden the other day said that we're about to hit a tiny recession, even though we are already in one, that literally it's everybody else's fault, that we're in a, quote, transition phase. They've been using this language of transition phase, that the economy's in a transition phase, literally since the beginning of his presidency. So we're just going to keep transitioning for all 4 years. At no point are we ever going to actually transition. We're just going to be in a transition phase all 4 years. And that's how they're going to get around this and swindle all of you. It goes on here to say, quote, it was sent hours after Biden falsely accused the agents of strapping migrants and promised they would pay, and hours before Mayorkas' presser actually took place. So you got Joe Biden taking the podium, saying all his stuff, never apologized still for this. Never apologized. Years later, still doesn't apologize. You have Jen Psaki never apologizing. Karine Jean-Pierre never apologizing. Alejandro Mayorkas, who knew about it, was sent the email, still doesn't apologize because it's everybody else's fault. The email from the Fox News reporter said was initially obtained by the Heritage Foundation pursuant of a FOIA request. They filed a Freedom of Information Act request with DHS in March seeking communications about the whipping incident. DHS didn't produce the documents, so Heritage sued them in June of last week. DHS turned over an initial batch of emails, which it was revealed. You got to love this stuff. It's unbelievable. And you know what? Let's just go ahead here. I have it for you. I wasn't going to play it, but let's just go ahead and hear it from the horse's mouth. After already receiving this email, let's see what he had to say here.
First of all, the images, as I expressed earlier, the images horrified us in terms of what they suggest and what they conjure up in terms of not only our nation's history, but unfortunately the fact that that page of history has not been turned entirely. And that means that there is much work to do, and we are very focused on doing it. But I will not prejudge the facts. I do not in any way want to impair the integrity of the investigative process. We have investigators who are looking at it independently. They will draw their conclusions according to their standard operating procedures, and then the results of that investigation will be determined by the facts that are adduced.
Amazing. The facts that are deduced, even though he had the facts right there in front of him. And by the way, if you're curious, this specifically was from September 24th, 2021. So over a year ago, still hasn't apologized. But he's going to take the podium and push that narrative. Why? Because the president was pushing the narrative too. It's all about narrative. It's all about stories. It's all about spinning. I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Bald Brad Show. If you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all our future content.